Welcome to Sako and the Moon, the podcast, brought to you by a couple of self-publishing horror authors. This is where we explore the world of self-publishing in the horror genre. In today's episode, we dive deep into the realm of writing various kinds of blurbs, which seems to be the hamstring of a lot of writers in general, let alone horror authors. This thing. I'm Sako Toomey. I am 3 times published, and I write horror. Mostly I write urban fantasy with horror overtones, I suppose. One of these days I'm going to work on that pitch. But my partner and co-host is Dwan L. Hearn.
Dwan L. Hearn, more affectionately known as the Moon. 1 time published, but also 1 time put out as far as the movie is concerned. What do you call that when you've released a movie? A short film. Cool. I don't know.
As a screenwriter?
Anyway, I released a small book. I am a screenwriter. I'm a podcaster, I'm a screenwriter, I'm an author now. Released 1 book, put out 1 movie, working on a next. I do the things.
Yay! Yay,
wear all
the
things.
Wearing all the hats.
The Omni hats are coming. I'm working on it. The Omni hats are coming. I say it every episode. It's going to be either... the hats are either going to show up, or it's going to be a running gag, and they'll never show up. But I'll always say it.
But we'll always... I'll end up making the hat. Absolutely.
The Omni hat's coming.
So, I think I'm going to start off by talking about the elevator pitch.
Okay. Well, first off, what's a blurb?
A blurb is basically a little explanation as to... The author blurb is to talk about who you are as an author. The book blurb is basically the back copy. And the third, as I lose my train of thought, it's wonderful.
The third kind of blurb does that same thing.
Logline.
Basically, a blurb is just letting you know what something's about. When you read that description on Netflix, blurb. When you read that thing in the back of the book, blurb. That's what it is. And it's not as easy as you think. It's not as easy as you think.
And as I know writers who will write other people's blurbs, but writing your own is like apparently the noose.
Envy of no one. I myself have a hard time when I was releasing the Copperweed collection, because it's a series of short stories. There was no one story to blurb. I could have probably blurbed
broken
all 5,
it out. Yeah.
But at the same time, since they're short stories, I don't want to give too much away, because that's practically the whole bloody story.
Right.
But when you have a novel, it's a little bit easier, but you got to make sure you say enough to get a person interested, but not too much that you've given it all away in the previews, like some movie previews do. And you don't want to do that. So finding that medium is really, really tricky. And I have a hard time with that.
I think all writers do, if we're being quite serious.
And we are. We're very serious.
So the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is basically you have a 30-minute talk, and then a 10-minute talk, and then a 5-minute talk, and then you have 30 seconds when you're with a producer in an elevator to tell your story and get the support. So that is the benefit of the elevator pitch. Now, there are 2 kinds of author blurbs. Technically, there is a business bio, and then there is a like personal bio. Yes, thank you, Mac, for punctuating that with balloons.
I don't have that. So. Kind of
It's
glad I catch myself doing that all the time.
I do it all the time, and I summon balloons every time. I need to
They just
start.
appear out of nowhere
I need to start doing this instead.
where nothing happened.
Okay. So, writing an author blurb involves crafting a concise and engaging introduction to yourself as an author, highlighting your background, accomplishments, and the essence of your work. So, first off, introduce yourself by name. That is kind of goes
So
without
I have
saying.
important.
Mention your profession as an author and any relevant background information, such as your education or previous works. We'll go into that a little more later. Share the journey that led you to become an author. This obviously would be the long form of the author blurb.
Natural.
Talk about your passion for writing and any pivotal moments in your life that inspired you to pursue this path. Discuss your influences, both literary and personal. And where it comes with influences, you can also sort of, in a way, use it as like, you can sort of use it as a, oh, what are the words that I'm looking for? It's terrible.
This is why we have dictionaries.
This is why we have dictionaries.
I literally have a dictionary app on my phone because I'm always looking for words. Literally.
Major works. So highlight some of your major works, including notable publications or projects that you've been involved in. Like if you have a podcast or you make movies or any of that stuff, this is when you would explain like why we should read your stuff. Provide a brief overview of each work, focusing on its genre, themes, and any unique aspects that make it stand out. Offer insights into your writing process. Again, this would be for the long form, but discuss your approach to crafting stories, developing characters, finding inspiration. Share any tips or techniques that you've learned along the way that might be helpful. Themes and motivations. Explore the recurring themes or motives in your works, which means if your writing has a certain voice, so should your blurbs.
Right.
So it's part of branding, which is a whole other talk.
That is a whole nother conversation.
Voice is super important, and so genre hoppers kind of like confuse me because that's like hopping voices.
Kind of, but at the same time, you have these little terms that we can kind of make up for. I think the one that sticks out of my head all the time, Steven Zimmer is always calling Sandy Linder the genre blender. She puts multiple genres together. And
Right.
if you can get called the genre blender, it automatically tells you, like, okay, so she does a couple of different things and gets them to work together. She's able to make the things mesh. You don't have no clue who this person is. You've never read a single sentence she's written, but you know something about her. And that's the goal. The goal of a blurb is to It's to get to know you
It's
and
not
figure
just
out why
that,
we do
but there needs to be like a memorable takeaway, right?
that. How
Such
much more memorable
as
can that
like
be?
a quote or a teaser for your upcoming projects or whatever. So aim to infuse your personality and passion for storytelling. Keep your tone conversational and authentic to engage the reader and leave them eager to discover more about you and your work. A lot of times at the end, I will include like where to find me, like visiting my website, going to my social media profiles, purchasing my books, stuff like that. But that call to action in your blurb is negotiable, I suppose.
I can definitely see why that would be beneficial. It's like, hey, you've done all this reading. At this point, you should like what you have read. And if that's the case, here's what you do to show me you've liked what you read. Here's the email if you want to get a hold of me now. Here's the website if you want to dig a little deeper. Here's my phone number or where my office is or whatever the case may be. If you're having to have your blurb on Tinder or whatever, then that was a joke. Don't put your
Yes,
blurb on Tinder.
yes,
That was a joke.
joke.
It's just comedy. But I guess it works for dating profiles too. So to hell with it. Right? Not right. Um, this is not that show. This is not that show. Realistically, though, a great example is me. Right? I haven't done a lot, but I've done a little bit. And so if I want to put myself out there to be um, seen and understood and more so respected and taken as a contemporary in this genre of ours, I would set up, who I am, where I'm from, a little bit about me, and then what got me into writing and what I've been writing, and talk about the book, talk about the films, um, talk about being independent because that shows I've done the work, that I wear the hats, and that I'm willing to do so. We are selling this hat.
No,
Um,
it's not that.
um, Not this one. You can buy it if you want.
No,
Um,
no, no.
the Omni hat's coming. Um, but no, seriously, like that's what you would do. Now, I have a question for you. Would this be the same thing, the long form that we're discussing? Would this be the same as a press kit?
Yes,
Can you give us a little bit more about press kits?
yes, I do. Press kits are basically this wonderful document that has all of your blurbs, all of your content. There are pages in the press kit that involve your projects, and there should be at least 2 pages about you. I have included a con pitch in my press kit. So, like, what kind of panels I do, what kind of panels I've like been featured on, what kind of talks do I do, and I like there are name dropping. I mean, I hate to do it, but like I've done things for this con and this con and this con.
I mean, you got to get recognized by a recognizable source. Realistically, two people who just know each other on the street mean nothing outside of those two people. But if you said, "Hey, I've worked with this producer who is known for doing X, Y, Z,"
Exactly.
or "I've worked in I've worked alongside so and so who's known for so and so," or da da da. Um, yeah, you kind of have to name drop because that, while it sounds like the braggadocious thing that someone would say or do, it's also a hint of credibility. And that's the hardest thing for someone like us who are independent to walk into a space and have is credibility. It's like, all right, so you're a dude who writes screenplays and writes novels. You didn't get picked up by a publisher. You're not picked up by a studio. You read a few books and you did a couple of things. What makes you credible? And if you're recognized by, a convention, or if you've worked alongside someone with a, particular name, that will give you credence. That will give you credibility. And that's one of the hardest things as an independent is credibility. But it's also the importance of the blurb and the press kit is this is who I am. This shows that I'm credible. Look at what I've done. Look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm working on.
That is, yeah, that is the. Ooh, I'm hearing myself through your speaker.
How's that better?
I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, so far so good. If you are unpublished, work on this. I would say mention the stuff that you're working on and who your influences are. Like, who would be, like, if you were to be on a bookshelf, like in the bookstore, what section would you be in? Right? And it's that credibility, which is like the business bio that I mentioned earlier. That is probably where I would put that. So I have a YouTube channel, for instance, with over 500 people. So I mentioned that in my bio blurb. And also like online conventions that I've done, miscellaneous YouTube events that I've taken part of, especially in an author sort of setting and marketing sort of settings like that. I became known for marketing for authors specifically.
Yeah. So since you mentioned that, you mentioned two different realms that you kind of dip your hands into. Would it be necessary to have two separate presentations of sorts for?
I do the same page, but I do both blurbs. So in my press kit, I have like a photo of me. I have my author blurb. I have my business bio, which is basically like why I should be talking, why you should read my stuff. Which is where I would feature things like I'm an author tuber and, whatever writing related stuff that I do that would give me credibility.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, come up with that takeaway, such as a thought-provoking quote or a teaser for your upcoming projects. Book blurbs. Crafting a book blurb requires a focused approach to capture the essence of your book and entice readers to explore it further. So here we go. First, the introduction. I like to start with the log line, but we'll talk about log lines a little later.
Yeah.
If you had 15 words to describe your story without using names, so using their occupation or their origin story in one word, like a werewolf and a vampire are, fighting for, which is the conflict. Yeah, exactly.
Sadly, that's Twilight. One of those.
Sadly, that's Twilight. Start with the hook to get the attention. This could be a question, a compelling statement, or a vivid description. I start with the setting. What is the status quo for the character? And there's a lot to say about like the synopsis that you make for your agent. Like that would give you like your entire hero's journey or whatever formula you use to make your story. And like and then focus on the conflict. Highlight what makes your book unique or intriguing, whether it's the unusual setting, a complex protagonist, or a compelling mystery. So, what is the question that you are asking the audience to answer? Well, that's what I do anyway. So, the way I map it out is log line of the status quo. What's the inception of the plot? Inciting incident. That's what I meant. English, I know it.
I don't pretend to know it.
So, what kind of themes and messages are explored in your book? What kind of issues does it confront? What is the conflict? And how do these themes resonate with readers on a personal or societal level? I make a lot of like societal comments in my books. So I would feature like what the flaw of the character is
Yes.
and how that abrasion is solved before the end of the story. So there's a better, the query letter, which would include the ending and stuff like that. I have a couple of authors who make their query letters before they write the book.
So that to help them keep us stay on track.
Uh-huh.
See, I'd be very awkward about that because in my writing style,
You
I
can
can sit there and give myself 20 points from beginning to end, and I'll hit every point up until about 14, and then I'll get a rando idea, and then I run with it. Because my character said, no, author, we're not doing this. We're doing this instead. It's a great oh, I have an example. So it's not horror, but it's what got me taking my writing more seriously. It's a short story series called Such Is Life. And I had the first few episodes planned out, knew exactly how this was going to go. I knew what was happening in 1, in 2, in 3, and in 4, probably in 5. And then I got to 2, I wrote something quirky, and that shifted 3. 3 went into a whole different direction. I wrote 3. Something happened in 4 that was not anywhere close to the plan, and now I am 8 episodes into that short story series. I have no clue where I'm going with it because the outline is now useless.
Right. I got you. Series blurbs, which we'll talk about a little bit, especially regarding log lines. Because how do you basically have an entire series in your media kit with all your covers and stuff like that? Like, what is each book about? What is the series about? Like,
Right.
not just what is it about, it's like where that conflict is and the possibility of finding out how the resolution of the conflict happens,
Right.
if that makes sense.
That makes sense to me.
Introduce key characters and their motivations. What challenges do they face? Which is that conflict I was talking about. Highlight any compelling relationships that drive the narrative forward. Characters
But
that
it doesn't have
drive
to be
the
romantic.
narrative forward.
It doesn't have to be romantic. Just because the word relationship, it could be the relationship with their mother, their best friend, with their dog. As
Absolutely.
long as it drives, it's the interaction between two or more characters. It's the relationship. I always like to specify because every time someone says relationship, people think love or romance or some sort of interest of that nature. And I feel like it's really, really important that we remind that all relationships are relationships, personal, professional, whatever. Like we have a relationship as co-host of this show, and that's important for people to recognize that when you look at something that says explain the relationship, it's like, well, these two people aren't dating. That's not what we mean. That's not what we mean here. That part's not important.
So, part of my process when I'm making characters
Mm-hmm.
and starting to put together plot, I'll make a map, like a relationship map.
Those are so
The
important.
and it's not just romantic relationships, though I'll mention if it is, but if it's like this person hates this person or this person suspects that they are a communist or whatever.
Oh,
Whatever.
is that a conflict?
Yeah.
I should
Let's
probably write
see.
one of those.
Oh,
Because,
like a relationship map.
yeah, kind of like a family tree.
Exactly.
Random. Have you ever seen the TV show Once Upon a Time?
Yes.
So there's a character named Henry, because essentially, if you ask me, the star of the show. So there's Henry, and if you ever decide to sit down and write out Henry's family tree, that would be the world's best practice of doing this for yourself. Watch the series, and as you watch the series, attempt to write down Henry's family tree. I will say nothing else, but if you've watched Once Upon a Time, you know how complicated, to say the least, Henry's family tree is. It's insane.
Super fun.
I couldn't even begin to reference it.
Writing style and tone. So, describe your writing style and the tone of the book. Is it lyrical and poetic? Is it fast paced and suspenseful? Or is it humorous and lighthearted? Like the setting kind of helps with this, and the this would be applicable to any genre, really. And the tone might change, and it's not like this is the tone and this is the, like it's more like the voice of the blurb should mimic the voice of the book. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and for anyone who's like younger than us, which doesn't take long for me because I'm as old as dirt, it's the vibe. Think of the vibe. What's the vibe that your book's giving? Um, what's that energy like? Make sure that things are connected because you want to associate this presentation of here's who I am with this is what I've done. So if I like who you are and I want to try to enjoy what you've done, the vibe should match.
Yes.
Essentially what you said.
That is basically what I'm saying, yeah. Any stylistic choices or narrative techniques that you've employed to enhance the experience? Um, let's see. Closing and call to action. A strong closing statement that leaves a lasting impression. This could be a cliffhanger or a quote or a question about the conflict. Maybe the question to end all questions.
Da-da-da.
Encourage people to check out your books and mentioning where they can find it, such as your website, major retailers, a specific publisher. As you write your book blurb, aim to convey the excitement and intrigue of your story while also providing enough information to pique the reader's curiosity. Keep the language concise and engaging, focusing on the most compelling aspects of your book that will resonate with your target audience.
This is the writer's best friend. It's the red pen.
The red pen.
Yeah, you can see the red little line. The red pen's the best thing in the world, because as you're saying that, the first thing I'm thinking of is I'll have an idea and I'll write it down, but then you'll find yourself droning. So you're going to want this little bad boy to start just crossing stuff out, rewording things. Once it's in front of you, you can rewrite it and change it, and then have something in the end that's clear and concise and that conveys exactly the message that you want without the extra rigmarole.
I am super into brief back copy from a book.
Yeah.
And I want to know as much about the story in as few words as possible.
Yes, because I've read some where I might as well no longer read the book, or
Right.
start the book at chapter 10 because you done already given me the intro of like the first 18 chapters or whatever it is,
Right.
and you don't really want that. But again, that's where the conflict and the difficulty comes. Kind of where I was when I was talking about at the beginning of this episode. I have a hard time taking, more accurately, Such as Life is a better example of this than the Copperweek collection, because the Copperweek collection, again, it's multiple stories. But I would have a hard time taking Such as Life, which is a series, it's drawn now, and conveying all of the series into something small and cut. You know, I was thinking about this as you were talking, and you're giving all this wonderful information, as you always do.
Aw.
And I was like, the city of Kingston, or everything was normal in the city of Kingston, but their normal is different than everyone else's.
Ooh.
Now, see? Now you're interested.
Right.
2 sentences.
Two
And that took me,
sentences.
mind you, I started writing Such as Life in 2018. And I just came up with that
Nice.
right now. The beauty of live. And like literally it was happening live while we were talking. And I'm like, that's what she means. And now I'm like, okay, cool. So if I was to take something simple, because I haven't mentioned a single character yet, I haven't mentioned a
Right.
single conflict yet. All I've mentioned was things are normal here, but their normal is different. And that's the gist of my story, is that in this town, everything's just kind of weird and quirky, except for my main character. My main character is traditionally normal.
Gotcha.
And then he's interacting in a world that is crazy and wacky, and he's trying to navigate those bits.
So the
And
question becomes, like, how wacky and crazy is this setting? And then drop your character into, like, not until, like, 2 sentences into your blurb, basically. And what is normal for him? What is the status quo as far as he is concerned, and how that in in this case, how that alone conflict is the conflict, right?
Right.
Is he is trying to navigate this world. So be cautious of world building in your blurbs.
Because then you start getting murky, and you don't want to get murky.
Right,
But this kind of ties into log lines.
right,
Because in film writing, log lines are important. And the one thing that Save the Cat, for example, talks about, a very popular screenwriting book, is like if you don't have a good log line, no one cares what you're doing.
right.
And a log line is, and I'll let you define it probably a lot better than I can, says the film writer. Um, it's like, give me your whole movie in like a sentence or two. Like suck the whole thing
A tweet,
into this,
basically.
more or less. Uh, and it's like, how would you like two guys? I can't remember the entire plot of Pulp Fiction. There's like two guys working for a so and so have to find a briefcase and go through shenanigans. That's essentially Pulp Fiction. Or what's a movie? Um,
In a world where magic is outlawed, a young orphan discovers her hidden powers and joins a rebellion against the oppressive regime, risking everything to uncover the truth about her past. What are the stakes, right? To uncover the truth about her past and the fate of her people. So, for one, that is 3 lines, but it is one sentence. It does not
yeah,
have names, but a couple of descriptors of the character can
yeah,
go a
I'll give
long
some
way.
examples. And that goes for context, because how a cab driver driving through the city of whatever during some natural disaster is different if it's like some school teacher is now having to drive through the same city during the same disaster. So
Right.
having those little details so I understand, okay, this is a driver who knows where he's going, he knows what he's doing, driving is his thing. He's going to probably do this expertly. Oh, she's a school teacher. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she can't drive, but this isn't her day to day thing. And so she's going to probably react differently to the same exact scenario and plot. So, with that in mind, having those little descriptors to give us a little bit of context goes a long way
Context is key
to everything.
to everything,
Really genuine.
especially in English. And English is probably one of the hardest languages
It
to
is known to
learn.
be one of the hardest languages in the world to learn.
Let's see. So, first off, what's the central concept that ties the series together? This could be the journey, the conflict, the world that we mentioned. Write a brief summary of the entire series, focusing on the key elements that define the narrative arc.
The really
So,
important stuff.
highlight the main characters, setting, and central conflict that spans across all the books. If you are that I like an episodic sort of writer, like Sherlock Holmes or adventure books in general, like you don't necessarily need to read the previous book to get the next.
Right. Kind of like CSI. Where you can watch an episode of CSI without knowing, you could watch no episode the past 4 or 5 seasons. But if you sat down for this 1 hour episode, you're going to get a beginning, middle, and end, enough context to understand some things. You might miss the little things here and there, some overarching concept. But generally speaking, you can enjoy sensibly your average episode of CSI. It's always been my example for that.
Yeah. Do, 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 do. Unique selling points. What sets your series apart from others in the same genre? Is it the premise? Is it the characters? Is it the plot twists? Identify the most compelling aspects of your series that will attract readers and keep them engaged through multiple books.
I feel like all of that is so difficult. Kind of like you meant what we were talking about before. I feel like it's really, really difficult for an artist to do on their own. Like
Absolutely.
to me, whether for Such Is Life or the Copperweed Collection or whatever, they all matter. Everything's important. Every joke, every comedic line, every event, every scenario, every conflict is important to me. But it may not be important to the overall arching story. And when you're trying to pitch, and essentially that's what we're doing here. With a blurb, you're trying to like say, hey, you, person over here, this is my thing. Here it is. Hopefully this makes you want to enjoy more of it. It's the sample at the mall. That's
Right.
a Louisville thing. That's a Louisville thing, and all those who know, it's one of those. If you know, you know. The sample at Jefferson Mall. How you doing? But that's what it is. It's a small sample. It's like, hey, this is what I do. Read this, like it, do the big things over here, because this is where my money comes from.
Indeed. So, having said, like, the selling points, the summary, the identification of the world or the theme, then you can start crafting the logline. So, start by introducing the protagonist or the main characters, providing a brief description of who they are and what they want. Describe the central conflict or overarching goal that drives the series forward, emphasizing the stakes that are involved. Convey the genre and the tone of the series, giving readers, a sense of what to expect in terms of style and atmosphere, and ensure the logline is clear and concise and memorable, capturing the essence of the entire series in a single sentence. Now, having said all of that, like crazy shit, to put in one sentence, you can always brain dump first and then whittle it down to its skeleton.
Yeah, the red pen thing. That was the whole point of the red pen thing. Throw it all at the wall, and then like just take off what actually needs to come off, and you're left with the important stuff after that.
Review your
And that's
log
all you need.
line. Yeah.
Because you talked about an elevator pitch at the very beginning of this, and that is essentially what we're working with. If you're sitting in an elevator and you're going from the first floor to the 10th floor, you got so much time alone, undistracted, uninhibited with this producer. That's your one and only guaranteed shot. What can you say in the traveling between floors 1 and 10 that will get them to say, make an appointment with my secretary. We'll talk about this. And that's it. That's all
Or you
get.
get a card, or, whatever.
Right.
So, review the log line and refine it to ensure that every word counts. Remove any unnecessary details or redundancies to keep it succinct.
Yes. And we're all good at being redundant or saying the same thing over again. That was
Experiment.
a pun, guys.
Experiment with different phrasing and wording to find the most impactful version of the log line. And then read it aloud to gauge its effectiveness and make any final adjustments to improve clarity and flow.
So important.
So, like I said, I would do a big brain dump, basically about the series, and then whittle it down to like 150 characters, for instance. Can I
So
sum
it's
the
really quick,
story
isn't
up
it?
in 15 words or less? Now, as far as this is concerned, I like to what's the word I'm looking for?
Oh
I
no, you
don't
hadn't
have
said it
it.
yet. The hard part is that always happens at the beginning of your thought, so no one has context to help you out. Happens to
Exactly.
me daily. It's daily.
Yeah, I'm just
Oh
getting
yeah. So
older,
there's
I'm
a thing
sure.
that because we're real people, people.
Because we're,
This is
yeah.
what happens when you wear all the hats. Like your brain gets flaky. Mine does.
Once you're satisfied with your log line, finalize it and consider sharing it with others for feedback. Once upon a time ago, on the late Twitter, there used to be a event where it threw you into the trenches of querying agents, and you needed that log line to fit in a tweet so that agents could see it and ask for something longer or ask for a submission or whatever.
I remember that. I think I
So
didn't
use
understand
it,
querying at the time, so
right? Use it to promote yourself. Promotion materials, book descriptions, marketing campaigns, stuff like that. Sorry, I have a cat who is creepy crawling across my lap.
that happens. Of course, if it
Oh,
happened over here, that'd be really, really weird. Mainly because we don't own a cat. Um, so there was suddenly a cat crawling across my lap. I'd be very terrified. Very terrified.
my cord is wrapped around my bracelet. As you write the series, update the log line. So revise it as needed to make sure that it accurately represents the series as it evolves over time.
That's important for you pantsers. If you're like me and you just kind of write things on the fly, you can have the greatest log line ever, the best blurb, and then you get that crazy idea, and you're not going to ignore it. But now the log line's different. Now the blurb's different. Now there's an event that you talked about is no longer happening, at least not the way it was supposed to. Yeah, keep it fresh.
Keep it
Is that what
fresh.
the kids? Is that what the kids say? Keep it fresh.
Is, is that what they say?
I have no idea what they say.
I'm an old lady. I don't know.
I have a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old who acts like he's 20. So yeah, it's
Fresh.
fresh. I think.
So the log line I use specifically for my series so that I have a explanation of what the series is about, but I don't give the ending? Question mark?
I
My
would
note.
vote no. I don't. If I want to know what your book's about, the last thing I want to know is the ending.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I know how it starts, what's in the middle, and how it ends, I don't care.
I don't care.
Best example I could give for something like that, I'll get a lot of flack for it, and that's okay because I'm a Trekker, so it doesn't even matter. Star Wars Episode 3. Star Wars Episode 3, I didn't care about. That movie's fine. The effects are good. It's fine. It did what it had to do. But I saw Episode 2. I seen the original Star Wars, which is Episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I had an idea of about where 3 was starting. And I knew how 4 started, so I know about how 3 ended. I didn't care. And it's because there was no mystery in it anymore. There's no mystery. There's no reason to pursue the movie in this case. So when you're putting your stuff out there, don't just give everything away because then there's no reason to pursue your book or pursue your movie or whatever your series or whatever it is you're doing.
Right.
You know, and that's the whole point. We're all, you know, you said yourself, self-promotion. We're trying to put ourselves out there, and I'm the God's worst at self-promotion. I can brag about myself to my friends, but I can't like type it all out because then it sounds braggadocious. And believe it or not, I'm not as cocky as I think I am. So when it comes to promoting myself, that's very, very hard. But if I need if I need to keep the lights on, and I need you to buy this book or invest in this movie, then I need to put myself out there like I'm the only person that matters, and I have to act like that. Because if I'm convinced, you'll be convinced. And if you're convinced, you'll spend your money on a ticket for that movie, or you'll spend your money at the bookstore for that book, or you'll invest in that series, or whatever it is that I'm trying to lead you to do.
Mm-hmm. The
And
call
that's
to action, basically.
her call to act. There you go. That's why she's the professional.
Giggle snort. So, oh no, hold on. Uh,
Live TV. Gotta love it. I love the live. The live of the internet is the best thing in the world. Because these things happen and it's the
okay.
absolute, it's gold. That's what happens when you wear all the hats. There's no quiet on the set. I just happen to be alone.
So, a good exercise is working on an elevator pitch. That means your log line, your bio, your blurb. And for each of the sections, so log line for your author bio super helps. Okay, my notes are useless from here on out.
Who
Query
needs
letters.
freaking notes?
Query letters are a great way to nail down what's important.
How do you determine what is important? 'Cause like I was saying before, to yourself as the creator of this work of art, everything's important. So what suggestion would you give? Because like you said, brain dumping is good. Just throw it all out there on the page. But as you're trying to remove something, what would be your suggestion of what it is to take out? Because to the person where everything's important, can't take out anything. You need all of this information. So how
Right.
do you determine what stays and what goes?
You know what's funny is so when I start a story, I do the inciting incident. What is normal? Excuse me. The inciting incident, plot point 1, 2, and 3, and then the question mark, right? So I state what the either the midpoint or the inciting incident. They usually hold the biggest stakes,
Yeah.
and if they do not succeed, what would happen, right?
Yeah. I like to always come always using some kind of reference or something around me. And I know I talked about it in a previous episode, but The Descent is a movie that comes to mind because the plot's so simple, so it's easy to break down. It's a group of friends who try to cheer up one of their members after a tragic accident happened to their family a year before. That's the whole. That's the premise of the movie. If you were to add one more sentence, is they do so by going into a cave and their one way out collapses. So now they have to get out or else. But there's another surprise, and I would leave it there.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, okay, well, they already have one conflict. What else could stop them? What could this other thing be? And the more questions that you can lead your potential reader to, is the more questions they're going to want to answer. And the only place they can get your answer is by reading your book.
Exactly.
Read your book, watch your series, whatever the situation is. But you have to give them a little bit, like literally just as you put it, like expert, like fantastically. Like, here's who we're dealing with. Here's what happened to them. This, and this follows. And now there's a problem. How do they get out of this?
How do they get out of this?
What do they do?
And what happens? And what happens if they fail?
And what happens if they fail? Now, some things can be implied because if it's the only way in or out of a cave system that's collapsed, clearly we know what happens.
Clearly, we know the stakes.
So you can minimize by making it super obvious. And I'll put that in quotes for a reason. If you can make it really obvious, then that's less words you have to use. And the quotation marks or the asterisks would be obvious to us, but that doesn't mean that's what you have to go with.
Right.
Because we talked about subverting expectations previously. So if you create the idea that something really obvious and blatant is going to happen, and then you flip that around and it goes in a whole different direction, then when they're in it and they're like, oh, this is the part where, oh, wait a minute. Oh, that's not what was supposed to happen. And now they're locked in. They're like, how did you get to this? And now that this is the thing, I don't automatically know what's happening. And they have to read the rest of it because they're just too invested by that point.
Right.
And you want to. It's the hook.
I want my blurbs to do just that, right? I want them to stand by themselves rather than like, oh geez, I need to summarize my book for the back blurb. That was hard.
It's a lot of B's. There's two B's in blurb. Like that's too many B's.
Super terrible. But doing
we can be ridiculous. It's okay.
I know, right? So doing the log line, doing the blurb, the simple blurb, doing the query letter, which is the long form, who are you, thing that we talked about in the beginning of the episode. Doing that to each of your objects, is that the word I'm looking for? Feet? So for your author stuff, for your book blurb, your back copy for your series law, stuff, like doing the elevator pitch with each of them is super helpful for promotional reasons. Especially if you're promoting on like social media or on a radio or on, like on a podcast, God forbid.
Because there's a lot of things that, and you make a great point with social media promotion. Uh, if you've ever tried to like promote a post or like a blog you did and you're trying to put it on the different platforms, Facebook doesn't work like Instagram. And they don't work like Twitter did or does, kind of does. Because Twitter has character restrictions.
Hmm.
Instagram has no character, but it's mostly focused around an image. And then Facebook's just kind of broad. You can do either one, but some things work better than others. So you now have to, you can either try to curate your post to be inconsistently compliant, or you can make it concise and consistent to where this one element works for all of them.
Hmm.
And trust me, it's a lot easier to do that because that's less work on you. Copy and paste becomes your absolute best friend. And it becomes consistent. And like you said, we mentioned branding. The consistency is vital because once they get to recognize something as associated with you, then that's who you are. I mean, we have a mutual convention that we attend, and if we're going to name drop some people who are not part of horror but are authors, Barbara Evers is synonymous with giraffes. Anytime I see a giraffe, I think of Barbara Evers. So that association is key to her identity as a source as an author. It's because giraffes are such a pertinent part of her book series. So by having that little thing that associates, if you see that name in an image of a giraffe, already get it, right? It's kind of like the branding of all of our miscellaneous things.
Again, with the branding.
Yeah,
And your blurbs should be part of your brand, for sure.
they all match
Hmm.
because this is the identity of who you are. You have to be. This is one of the reasons why people use pen names. It's one of the reasons why people use graphics, like the cool one that is in the corner, wherever it is, um, designed by somebody awesome. And that's the thing. Like, so if you see that somewhere, that's it. That's the identity, and you associate those things together. My nickname is Moon. My logo consists of moons. So these are associated items. If I put a moon something on next to everything I do, like I'm not wearing one of my T-shirts, but there's moon logos on my T-shirt because that's my name. People call me Moon more often than they call me Dewan. So it's an association thing. People associate me with moons. They'll see moons. They'll hear this. Everything's associated. So the brand
Branding.
goes through. And as I represent myself, I represent my brand. I represent my story. And those are the identifying markers that will be used in a blurb.
Hmm.
Whether it's your bio on your about page for your website,
Ding, ding.
whether it's the little author portion on the back of the book or inside the cover, the dust jacket,
Yep.
all of those little things. That's what we're talking about here. And it's
Yep.
all about association and branding. And if you're an independent like we are, and we make the jokes all the time about wearing all the hats, but we're
It's on
wearing all
you.
the hats.
It's on you to be able to talk about yourself if you're
Some
actually
hats,
going somewhere with your knowledge,
right?
with your
This hat,
story.
this hat, and the toboggan I was wearing in other episodes all bear this logo. I'm going somewhere. They all bear this logo. So when you see this logo, you associate it with me. It identifies me, it identifies my brand. But at the same time, your blurb, your log line, whichever facet of these things should all associate your book. It should be
Yep.
really clear in as little as possible, as clean, as simple as possible. You know what I mean? It should be simple because you don't want too much processing power to be used in the recognition of your stories. For a good example, Back to the Future. I know none of these are horror, but Back to the Future, the first one has one dude on the cover of the book, or the cover of the movie. Part two is Marty and Doc Brown. Part three is Marty, Doc Brown, and Clara, right? So part one person. Part two, two people. Part three, three people. So if I just look at the cover with no words, I know the difference between parts 1, 2, and 3. I see a DeLorean. That's easy. That's cut and dry. Marty McFly has a very concise outfit throughout the course of the series. You see that little puffer jacket, you get it. These characters have these identifiable
Features?
markers of some sort.
Yeah.
Features, yeah. Imagine if you see a book that's just a black cover and two pointy teeth. What movie is that? It's probably Dracula. It could be Blade, but it's probably Dracula. It could be Twilight, but it's probably Dracula. Because in the end, fangs, vampires, Dracula. It's simple. It's simple. And when you are advertising or promoting yourself to a producer, to a publisher, to an agent, it's got to be clean. It's got to be simple. You have to make it really easy for them. It's baby food on the spoon, the soft spoon, the old school one, and you have to feed it to them. But you get one bite, because after that, like a baby would, one bite. If they don't like it, they spit it out, they throw the spoon, they throw the plate in the air, and you get no chance of trying to do it again.
Right.
So all of this was to say, don't overthink it, but think it through.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that it's simple, because in the end, sometimes you get one shot with an agent. You get one shot with a producer or a director. You get one shot with a publishing company. You get one shot to get your name out there. And if the work is a masterpiece, what difference does it make if you haven't convinced a single person to read it?
Ding, ding, ding. All right. So we tore that apart.
That's what we do here.
Yes,
That's what
absolutely.
we do, man. We break it down.
It's funny that we mentioned social media before, because that's actually our topic for next week.
Oh, man.
We get to talk about social media and how it plays into promotion and making readers into customers, and how that works out for different kinds of, like YouTube and Facebook and X and Instagram. We'll tear all that apart, and hopefully it will be helpful when putting together a campaign for your stuff. If you like this video at any point, you might want to hit the like button, maybe, possibly, maybe. Pretty please. It tells the algorithm that, you actually want to see stuff like this, and
We're the cool kids, and they don't know it yet. We're the cool kids.
you might want to subscribe and maybe even ring that bell on the off chance that YouTube actually notifies you when we go live. And we will catch you on the flip side.